Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why certain music makes you feel a bit queasy or just plain wrong, even if it sounds sophisticated? Well, this new study dives deep into that feeling, exploring how music can actually make us feel disgusted. Imagine this: music is usually seen as beautiful, something to lift our spirits or make us feel deep emotions like sadness or joy. But what about disgust, that gut-wrenching feeling of something being revolting? It is a basic emotion, but it is super hard to make music that reliably sparks that specific feeling. For a long time, researchers have kind of ignored it in music. Why? Because disgust is often tied to our senses of taste and touch, not so much to hearing. Plus, music is usually all about aesthetics, and disgust is, well, the opposite of aesthetic. This study tackles that problem head-on, trying to figure out what makes musical sounds disgusting and how to create music that actually makes us feel that way. So, our researchers at Pontificia Universidad Javeriana wanted to create some specific music clips that could reliably make people feel disgusted. They knew it was tricky, as past attempts often got mixed up with fear or anger. They also realized that maybe, just maybe, music doesn't have to be purely abstract. What if it could use sounds that we already associate with unpleasant things in real life, like the sounds of contamination? But in a stylized musical way, this is where the story really begins. They decided to create 36 short musical clips, each about 20 seconds long. These weren't just random sounds. They were carefully composed to fall into three categories: disgust, positive, and neutral. The idea wasn't to find some secret musical code for disgust, but to blend structural elements with sounds that already have a negative icky association for us. For the disgust clips, they looked at some older research that suggested things like slow tempos, lots of harmonics, and rounded sound shapes might be related to disgust. But they went further. They also asked the composer to add things like glissandos, which are those sliding sounds, especially in the lower registers, to create a sense of instability. They wanted none. Tonal environments to avoid sounding predictable, and crucially, they wanted stylized versions of sounds associated with disgust. Think sounds that might remind you of bodily fluids, chewing, or wetness, but made musical. For the positive clips, they used more traditional musical ideas like major chords and ascending melodies, things usually linked to pleasant feelings. And for the neutral clips, they aimed for something bland and steady, without strong emotional cues. Now, here is where the experiments come in. In the first experiment, 125 people listened to all these clips and rated them on a few scales. They rated how pleasant or unpleasant the music was. That is valence, how exciting or calm it felt. That is arousal. And importantly, on a scale from pure disgust to pure fear. And here is where it got interesting. The disgust clips definitely hit the low valence, high arousal quadrant, meaning they were perceived as unpleasant and exciting. This was great, but there was a big hiccup. When it came to separating disgust from fear, they weren't quite there yet. The results showed no significant difference between the disgust and fear ratings. Essentially, some of the clips meant to be disgusting were actually sounding more like fear. This is actually shown in Figure 1, where you can see the disgust and fear categories are really blended. The researchers realized that some specific musical choices, like those low pedal tones, might be too closely associated with fear. So they went back to the drawing board. They took 7 of the clips that weren't quite hitting the mark and revised them. Their strategy was to remove those low-register pedal tones that seemed to be triggering fear. They also boosted the presence and salience of those stylized disgust-related sounds and made the rhythms even more irregular. Then, they brought in a new group of 62 people to listen to these revised clips. And this time, they saw a big improvement. The revised disgust clips were now significantly different from the fear clips. They were landing more clearly on the pure disgust side of the continuum, as you can see in Table 4. The average rating for disgust clips was actually in the negative range of the disgust-fear scale, meaning closer to disgust than fear. This is shown really clearly in Figure 3a, where the disgust category is clearly separated from the fear end. The study found that these disgust clips were perceived as low in valence, as expected, but the arousal levels were no longer significantly different from the positive clips. This is interesting, but the main win was the separation from fear. Looking at Figure 5 really sums it up. You can see the positive clips up in the top right, high valence, high arousal, neutral clips in the middle, and the revised disgust clips in the bottom left quadrant, low valence, with arousal now more varied, but the key is their position on the disgust. Fear axis. The revisions worked. So, what is the big takeaway? The researchers found that to make music that genuinely sounds disgusting, you can't just rely on abstract musical rules like tempo or harmony. You really need to incorporate sounds that have a semantic link to contamination, even if they're stylized or electronically altered. It's like those sounds act as indexes. pointing to a real-world experience of something gross, and that association helps trigger the disgust response. They found that low-register pedal tones, which might signal danger or threat, and thus fear, actually hindered the disgust perception. Removing them and amplifying those icky sounds was key. This is really cool because it opens up a whole new area for research. It means music can express more than just the typical happy, sad, or angry emotions. It can tap into those more primal feelings like disgust, which are super important in how we judge things, especially in social and political contexts. Think about how music is used in movies to make you feel revulsion towards a villain or a situation. This study provides the building blocks for understanding how that works. Now, no study is perfect. The researchers admit that they didn't test other negative emotions like anger or sadness, so we don't know if these musical features only create disgust or a broader range of negative feelings. Also, their participants were mainly adults from a university setting, so cultural differences or how children might react could be different. They also relied on people just rating how they felt, not on actual physical reactions like sweating or changes in facial expressions. That is something for future studies to explore. They also didn't precisely pinpoint how much stylization you can have before the sound stops feeling disgusting and just becomes abstract music again. But even with these limitations, this study is a huge step forward. It shows that disgust can be evoked through music, but it requires a smart combination of musical structure and sounds that have a learned association with unpleasant things. It challenges the idea that music is always about beauty and abstract art. Sometimes music can be about evoking those deeply ingrained, survival-based emotions like disgust, using sonic elements that directly tap into our built-in defense systems. So, the next time you hear a piece of music that just makes your skin crawl, it might be that the composer has cleverly woven in those indexical sounds of contamination, playing on your brain's ancient disgust response. It's a fascinating peek into how sound and emotion are intertwined, and how even something as primal as disgust can be expressed, and perhaps even manipulated through the power of music. It really makes you think about the emotional power of sound in ways we might not have considered before. What do you guys think? Have you ever experienced music that made you feel genuinely disgusted? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this dive into the science of sound and emotion, be sure to hit that like button. Subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating research breakdowns, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching and stay curious.